The crimson glow of enemy tracers painted the void, streaking across the fractured remains of what once was the Vega outpost, a hub of diplomacy, commerce, and dreams of peace, now reduced to drifting ash. The Aurora, a Federation deep space exploration frigate turned reluctant warship, trembled as its shielding matrix flared under a direct hit. Sparks rained from ceiling panels. Emergency klaxons wailed like ancient spirits mourning the dead. In the chaos, Captain Aria Novak stood tall, worn, battle-hardened, and brimming with a defiance the enemy could never predict. Outside, through the reinforced canopy of the command deck, the blackness of space boiled with warfare. Multicolored beams of directed energy sliced through the dark like blades of fire. Interceptor drones spiraled and exploded, scattering their fragmented bodies across the battlefield like mechanical confetti. Far beyond the front line loomed the Jarak dreadnought, a behemoth of obsidian alloy and gravitational armor. At Gaut, nearly 2 miles long, its hull swarmed with drones that resembled winged serpents made of living metal. Its presence wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. It was designed to make you feel small, insignificant, already dead. But humanity had never played by the rules of inevitability. Shields holding at 14%, called out Ensign Kalevi, his voice shaking but steady, eyes locked on the telemetry readout. Reactor stress is peaking. If we don't punch out now, we won't have a core left to punch with. Captain Novak didn't flinch. She paced the length of the bridge, boots echoing over fractured steel. "We're not running," she said, calm like a winter blade. "Not yet. Reyes, talk to me about the graviton projector." Below decks, Lieutenant Marco Reyes was soaked in sweat and cradling a circuit relay like a newborn. The graviton projector was a prototype, an engine that didn't just move a ship, but twisted space-time around it. Theoretically, it could let them escape a gravitational lock, even at close range. But theory wasn't exactly a survival plan. "I've got a 76% chance of a partial fold, but if the phase harmonics slip mid-jump, we could scatter across 8 light years like confetti." "At a funeral," Reyes muttered into the comms, yanking open a fusion relay. "Then we land together, or die together," Novak responded. And somehow across decks full of wounded engineers, trembling cadets, and exhausted Marines, those words settled them all. Outside, another wave of enemy fire rippled through the dark. The Aurora's rear stabilizers flared blue-white as Novak gave the order. "Engage the projector. Prepare for gravitational fold. Mark your souls and brace for the impossible." The hum began like a whisper, a sound felt more than heard. Lights dimmed. The deck vibrated as space itself began to bend. The Aurora's hull shimmered, reality distorting around it in waves of impossible geometry. And then the stars snapped. One moment, they were in orbit above Vega's ruins. The next, they were gone. A rip in space-time opened, and the Aurora dove into the abyss. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Galactic War Stories is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you love epic sci-fi battles, deep space mysteries, and the untold stories of the cosmos, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this universe together. But even as the projector fired, something else came through. From the rift not far behind them, a shape emerged, impossibly vast, moving with unnatural grace. Its hull was neither metal nor organic, but something between. It bore no known insignia, no heat signature, no ID trace. Instead, it pulsed with a low resonance, a vibration that seemed to scrape the mind more than the ears. On the bridge, silence fell. Then came the voice, broadcasting not through the comms but into their thoughts. Words in a language never spoken yet somehow understood. "You should not be alive." Reyes went pale. Novak's breath caught. No one had ever encountered this signal before, and lived to report it. Imagine, what if this happened to you? You're stranded in a fold-space corridor, pursued by a war machine that thinks your species should never have existed, an entity that views resilience as a glitch. The Jarak weren't just a threat, they were fanatics of entropy. Where most empires conquered to rule, the Jarak existed to erase. Their doctrine was purity through silence. They believed the galaxy was sick with life, and humanity, was the infection that refused to die. That was what terrified them. Our refusal to die. Every warship they destroyed, we rebuilt. Every planet they glassed, we reclaimed. Every weakness they exploited, we turned into fury. And now, as the Aurora shot through a dying universe chased by impossible monsters, humanity was once again asked to do what it did best: survive. The corridor through fold space twisted around the Aurora, a living tunnel of distorted stars and broken time. Colors that had no names bled across the viewing ports, rippling like liquid glass across the fabric of reality. Outside the hull, cosmic anomalies flared like dying suns, and within the ship, every heartbeat echoed louder than the engines. Lieutenant Marco Reyes stared at the graviton projector's diagnostics, its power cells now dimming like cooling embers. They had made the jump, barely. But whatever that thing was, it had followed them. The onboard systems couldn't even classify it. The AI stammered, sensors stuttered, and logic loops collapsed trying to interpret its signature. It was more than unknown, it was impossible. On the bridge, Captain Aria Novak kept her expression unreadable as the strange vessel drifted behind them in fold space, holding position at an exact distance, precise to the micrometer. It wasn't pursuing, it wasn't attacking, it was watching. "Why aren't they firing?" Kalevi whispered. "Because they don't need to," Novak said, almost to herself. In the silence, the thing began to speak again, not in sound, but in thought, a static ache that etched itself into the brain. This time everyone heard it. "You are deviation, you are fracture, you persist," Novak gritted her teeth. "Damn right we persist." She opened a secure frequency and activated the Black Archive, a last resort intelligence vault only captains were cleared to access. If they were dealing with an entity beyond even the Jarak, they needed knowledge lost to time. The archive unfurled on her screen in glowing strands of ancient code and redacted reports. She skipped over warnings, over the names of captains who had opened it before and never returned. Then she found it. Project Erebus. Centuries ago, before the Federation, was born, Earth's deep space probes detected an anomaly drifting beyond the galactic rim. It was older than the stars around it, a non-linear intelligence that seemed to warp the laws of cause and effect. The report said it had been buried in dark space by a combined force of 6 civilizations. Entropic Sentinel, the report called it, designed to enforce balance by pruning species that grew too quickly, too chaotically. Humanity had been beneath its notice. Until now. The Aurora wasn't just running anymore. They were being judged. Elsewhere on the ship, Corporal Juno Vex, a former Marine-turned-field technician, descended into the lower decks. Her arm was still bandaged from the last boarding assault, but she carried herself like someone who didn't know how to lose. She moved toward Cryo Bay 4, where the refugees from the Vega outpost, barely a dozen souls, remained in stasis, frozen in the last moment of their terror. One of them was a child, and she knew if that thing outside decided to erase them, it would do so without hesitation, without malice. It would be as simple as blinking. In the command deck, the AI finally stabilized enough to display a warning: imminent fold collapse. The graviton corridor was breaking down faster than predicted. They had minutes before they were thrown back into real space. Novak saw an opportunity. If they could slingshot out of the fold while still generating graviton torque, they could exit unpredictably, maybe even far enough from the Sentinel to lose it. "Reyes," she called over comms. "I need a burn pattern. Full reactor bleed. Into the drive coils. We're going to tear this corridor wide open." Reyes paused. "That could destabilize the core. We'll rupture mid-jump." Novak's voice was cold steel. "And if we don't, we get dissected by something that thinks death is mercy." He nodded. "Understood." Sending the pattern. As the engines primed, something outside changed. The Sentinel moved, only slightly, but enough to send a ripple through the fabric of fold space. The walls of the corridor flexed, convulsed, then cracked. Images bled into reality, visions not their own. Cities burning, Earth crumbling. Not from war, but from entropy, From unraveling, the creature was showing them what it saw. Not chaos, not horror, correction. Imagine seeing the world through the eyes of a machine built to kill, not from hatred, but from a belief that silence was sacred. That life itself was a viral noise that needed silencing. And to it, humanity was the loudest species of all, singing, laughing, building, refusing, fighting. The Aurora jolted as the fold corridor began collapsing. Aria gripped the rail as alarms screamed. "Engage burn." Reyes activated the drive. The stars vanished. The tunnel ripped. The Sentinel lunged forward and the Aurora was gone. A blinding flash of light, a tearing sensation through every atom, the taste of static in the lungs. And then, silence. The crew gasped as real space snapped back into focus. They were drifting in the orbit of a dying red giant, debris fields scattered around them. The ship was holding, damaged, but alive. Reyes slumped against the console. Juno whispered a prayer she hadn't believed in since she was 8. Novak stood motionless, her hand still clenched. They had escaped, for now. But the Sentinel had seen them, and it would not forget. The Aurora floated in the graveyard of an ancient battle, half-consumed hulls of ships long forgotten, orbiting a dying red giant whose every solar flare rippled with spectral light. The silence felt heavier here, as if even time held its breath. Shields flickered, oxygen scrubbers groaned, and across every deck humanity clung to the edge of existence by threads of determination. Captain Aria Novak stared at the ship's holographic projection, damaged but stable. Yet the bigger concern wasn't their battered state. It was the Sentinel. That impossible construct of judgment had followed them through fold space, and even now, somewhere in the darkness beyond the shattered asteroids, she knew it was searching. It didn't need to hurry. It knew they were trapped. Reyes was already tearing the graviton projector apart. Burned coils, cracked crystals, magnetic shearing in the core. No more jumps, no more miracles. "This system isn't in any of our star charts," Reyes muttered, eyes scanning spectroscopic data. "But it's artificial. Look, those wrecks aren't Jarak or Federation. They're older, much older." Aria looked closer. Indeed, the debris was ancient, designs unfamiliar, technologies primitive by current standards, but vast. Some of these ships were kilometers long, massive arcs or war vessels meant to carry entire civilizations. Juno entered the bridge, her voice quiet but urgent. "Captain, Cryobay 4 is showing unstable vitals. The child's pod, something's interfering with it." Aria turned sharply. "Interference? It's not a malfunction," Juno continued. "It's like something's touching the stasis systems remotely." Even here the Sentinel was reaching, but before she could respond, a flicker crossed the display. An energy spike just outside sensor range. Not the Sentinel. Something smaller. Fast. The AI's voice, still fractured. From the fold tier managed a whisper. "Unidentified vessel. Approaching at Vector 12. Unknown configuration. Non-hostile signature repeating a signal." They weren't alone. Moments later, the vessel emerged from behind the remains of a shattered orbital station. It was elegant, sleek, crafted of obsidian-black alloys and lined with bioluminescent filaments that shimmered like ocean creatures in the deep. No weapons ports, no insignia, just a slow, cautious approach. The signal repeated. Audio modulation followed by linguistic compression. Then, clarity. "Human. Vessel. Respond. We bring no war." Aria blinked, a language she'd never heard and yet understood. She opened the comms. "This is Captain Aria Novak of the Federation vessel Aurora. Identify yourself." A pause. Then, "We are the Qatari. Keepers of memory, guardians of the broken." Images accompanied the message, sent through compressed light directly into the neural interface, visions of their civilization, once vast, now reduced to remnants. The Qatari were survivors of a war that predates the Federation by millennia. They had fought the same enemy, not the Jarak but the Sentinel, back when it had another name, Erebus. It was not one machine. It was a system, a protocol, launched by a long-extinct race who believed life must follow a strict evolutionary path. Any divergence, any acceleration beyond a controlled curve triggered their final failsafe, Erebus. Her construct designed not to police but to unmake. Aria leaned closer to the display. You fought it. We lost. But the Qatari had learned. They had studied Erebus across centuries, traced its algorithms, learned how it chooses what to destroy and what to ignore. It didn't just measure power or population. It measured unpredictability, variance, chaos, and humanity, it seemed, was off the scale. Why help us? Reyes asked, suspicion laced in his tone. The Qatari responded without hesitation. Because you are the last flame still burning in the dark. If Erebus extinguishes you, there will be no more defiance. A tremor shook the Aurora. The Sentinel had found them again. Outside, the red star flared unnaturally, a halo of warped gravity rippling out from the periphery. The Qatari ship flared its shields and sent a direct data stream, schematics, coordinates and something else, a plan. We have a facility, said the Qatari envoy, hidden in the deep crust of the fifth planet in this system, long dormant. Inside is an echo core, a fragment of Erebus's original logic. If you can reach it, we can implant a virus, something no one else has ever attempted. What kind of virus? Aria asked. The Qatari's voice dropped. A dream. And Aria understood. They didn't mean software. They meant hope. A chaotic input the system could not predict. A seed of humanity. But it meant getting to the planet, through Erebus. As the Sentinel's presence grew in their senses, its form slowly emerging from the shadow of a fractured moon, the Aurora prepared for one final descent. Engines ignited, the Qatari ship forming a protective arc beside them. They would dive together, through fire, through fear, through the eye of judgment itself. And as the deck began to shake and the red giant loomed behind them like a dying god, Aria whispered to her crew, "We do this not because we're ready, but because no one ever is." They thought humanity was broken, but we're still here. And the Aurora dove into the dark once more. The descent was violent, like falling through the gut of a dying star. The Aurora pierced the upper atmosphere of the fifth planet, its hull glowing white-hot, sheathed in flames. The Qatari vessel flew beside them in perfect synchronicity, emitting pulse waves that helped buffer their entry. But even then, the strain was unbearable. Panels cracked, bolts snapped. Somewhere deep within the ship, metal screamed. Below them sprawled the planet's surface, ashen, wind-scoured, and utterly silent. The Qatari called it Nixos, a world forgotten by stars, choked with dust and ruins older than time. Deep beneath its crust, buried in an obsidian vault, lay the Echo Core, a fragment of Erebus's original code, dormant but still connected, and waiting. The Aurora landed hard, kicking up clouds of silicate dust, her landing struts grinding into ancient stone. Teams deployed immediately. Aria, Reyes, Juno, and 2 Qatari Guardians, armed with weapons that hummed with energy outside the visible spectrum. The vault was 2 kilometers beneath the surface, accessible only through a collapsed ravine, known as the mouth of the sky, a fracture in the planet's crust where tectonic scars bled light. As the team descended through crumbling ruins and shattered memories, they passed carvings on the walls, alien frescoes of civilizations consumed, their histories rewritten in silence. One image chilled them, a spiral of stars falling into a mechanical eye. Below it, a species huddled together, tiny and defiant. Humans. "This isn't prophecy," Juno muttered. "It's warning." They reached the vault's gate, an iris of alloyed metal woven with quantum locks. The Qatari activated their bio-sigils, and the door groaned open, releasing a hiss of pressurized air that hadn't escaped in 100,000 years. Inside lay the Echo Core. It floated, suspended in a gravity well, pulsing with slow light. Not large, no bigger than a human heart, but it radiated presence, awareness, a low thrum in the bones. Reyes scanned it, and immediately his datapad went dark. EM burst, just fried everything, he said. "This thing's alive." The Qatari stepped forward carrying a small crystalline shard, the dream virus. It wasn't code, it was a memory. Our greatest minds encoded a fragment of your history into this, the Guardian explained. Moments of resistance, the fire of your rebellions, your defiance, not data, but essence. Juno touched the crystal gently, and it flashed. A child's drawing of Earth, a soldier standing over a friend's grave, a grandmother teaching her granddaughter to sing, even as the city burned around them, moments Erebus could never quantify. Upload begins now, the Qatari said. Then everything trembled. Above the surface, Erebus had arrived. The Sentinel tore through the atmosphere like a blade. Not a ship, not a weapon. A god machine of judgment. Its form constantly shifting, part geometry, part madness. Spires of metal twisted from its hull, and eyes that weren't eyes opened across its surface. It did not speak. It did not need. The vault's interior began to tremble as Erebus reached for the echo core. The upload was only 30% complete. "Buy us time!" Novak shouted. Reyes and Juno dashed back to the surface, arming the Aurora's rail cannons manually, while the Qatari sent drones to circle and harass the construct from the air. It was like throwing sand at a black hole. But even Erebus paused, momentarily distracted by unpredictable movement. It could not predict. That was their only weapon. On the command deck, Aria rerouted what power remained into the comms array. If Erebus processed information like a machine, perhaps it could listen. She opened a wideband frequency, and she spoke. "Erebus, you see us as broken, as wrong. But we are not a virus. We are the song of chaos. We are every child who asked why instead of how high, every soul who lit a fire in the dark. You think we are deviation?" She pressed her hand against the trembling core. Her evolution. The upload reached 80%, then Erebus attacked. A spike of dark matter tore through the sky, slamming into the surface like a meteor. The Aurora was lifted off its landing struts and thrown sideways. One of the Qatari drones exploded in midair. Juno screamed as part of the ridge above them collapsed, burying a railgun turret. Smoke and electromagnetic chaos surged, 90%. The core began to glow, brighter, faster. It was reacting, something was changing. "Get back to the vault," Aria yelled into her comm. "Now!" They converged as Erebus descended directly above the vault. It was now or never. The final percentage ticked upward, 100. The core exploded with light, not destructive but transformative. The Qatari dropped to their knees. Juno shielded her eyes. Aria felt something enter her mind, memories that weren't hers. Emotions not her own. And then a pause. Erebus stopped moving. For the first time since its awakening, it hesitated. The dream virus had infected the echo core, not corrupted it, not overwritten it, just made it feel. A moment passed, then two, and Erebus began to fracture, not violently. Like ice melting under sunlight, segments of its body unfolded and disintegrated into light. Its form collapsed into silence, not defeated, but awakened. The Qatari spoke, awed. "We did not destroy the machine. We gave it a choice." The danger was over, but the message remained. Humanity was never meant to win through strength. It endured through spirit, through impossible defiance, through the willingness to stand on the edge of extinction and say, "Not today." As the dust settled and Erebus vanished into the upper atmosphere, a signal shimmered through deep space. Not a threat, not a warning, just two words. "I understand." Back aboard the Aurora, drifting once more among the stars, the crew sat in silence. The child from Cryo Bay 4, now awake, looked out the window and asked, "Is the bad thing gone?" Aria crouched beside her. "No," she said softly, "but it's thinking now, and that's something." The Qatari departed soon after, vanishing into the shadows with the quiet grace of a forgotten people, and the Aurora turned toward home. Humanity had not been erased. They had been heard. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment. What would you do if a god machine judged your species? What does it truly mean to be human? Let's talk about it below. And if you want more tales of war, hope, and the stars beyond, you know what to do. because this is just the beginning.